On today's episode, we talk about how the government has a right to force you to obey, why Elon Musk's $11 billion tax payment still isn't enough, hear Alec Baldwin defend himself on his expertise gun handling, and contemplate someone's vivid nightmare of their mask coming off in public. This is Cringe Posts. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast, the show where we take those bad posts you see on your feed, we dissect them, we laugh at them, talk about why they're wrong, and we engage in the flame wars so you don't have to. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host Britt, and before we get started, we would love it if you would comment, share, like, subscribe, all of the good things, leave a review, help us get in the algorithm. We are growing, and we love that trend to continue. So we're going to go ahead and dive into some cringy posts here, and we always have to start with our own cringy posts from the past. So we're going to take a look, and this post is from Britt, which reads, "Yes, getting into Bitcoin at $4 would probably have been a good idea, but I feel bad for all of the suckers getting into it at $700 plus. Nowhere to go but down." Nowhere but down indeed, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if it went negative and then you multiply it by a negative number, that's probably what I meant, right? So you get a positive. Yeah, man. This is one of those things that I said this at that, and I think this is 2015, and then I said it again when it was at like $4,000, and then I said it again at $20,000, and then that's about when I stopped saying it. So
yeah.
What's kind of interesting about Bitcoin, though, is you can kind of correlate it exactly to the inflation of the dollar, right? And that's pretty cool. I don't exactly it's kind of a difficult asset or currency to me because it's just like I'm not sure how many people fully understand or have the breadth of knowledge about economics. Obviously, I didn't in 2015 when I wrote this, but to understand why it's so valuable. And so it's hard for me to see how how public perception correlates with the price and whether it's actually solid enough to believe in. But anyways, I was one of those idiots that thought it was just a trend and a fad. And if I had listened to someone else at that time and I bought, $2,100 worth of Bitcoin, I'd be kind of sitting pretty right now.
I know. Well, I remember probably around when this was, I think 2014-ish, something like that. Right when it kind of was starting to become a little bit more mainstream to talk about, I remember in college there was a debate round about it, because there had been an article written in The Economist about it. And I just remember that everyone came out of those debate rounds like that was the worst debate ever. Nobody knew what they were talking about. No one had any clue how it worked. No one had any clue what the valuation was, what the benefits were. And I remember having read that Economist article thinking I had an okay grasp, and I think I did okay in the round because I'd happened to have read that article specifically. But even then, I didn't understand the fuller implications of it. It's sort of like, okay, it's a digital currency and it's anonymous. But when you put it in the context of being able to avoid banks altogether, being able to avoid inflation, being able to avoid federal, manipulation tactics, that makes you realize the depth that there is to it. Now, I'm not saying if I'd realized that at the time, I would have said go all in. I still think my concern of it, then and it is now, is just that there's going to be some sort of federal intervention, manipulation of it, or regulation or whatever. But that being said, I think it's a phenomenal asset, and if only we'd had that foresight, but unfortunately too many of us were like you there, Britt.
Yeah. So I guess this is all of us cringe, I guess, but I get to be
the collective
the face of it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for taking one for the team here, Britt.
Oh, you got it.
All right, we'll move on to our first cringe post, and this one is from a blue check mark, so we go ahead and out him, and it is from Jim Cramer. Jim Cramer tweets, "Government has a right to force you to obey and has always exercised it, especially under GOP." The first thing that strikes me about this is I don't know why, but it reads like not totally off grammatically, but just enough to make me think it's sounds kind of simplistic and childish. Government has a right. Yeah, you're right. It's very basic. You get this point across, but it doesn't sound pretty.
Yeah, Jim Cramer has been coming out with just some really dumb stuff, the past few weeks, whether it's his takes on the meme stocks or his take on that the economy we have right now is the strongest he's ever seen it, or including this take, which includes some of his on his actual show, saying like, I want everyone to be forced to be vaccinated. It's really unfortunate, and it's just these folks that like have this this view that the government, because it exists, has a right to force people to obey. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you're correct, and you're admitting that they have a monopoly on the force to make you do something, or I guess the monopoly on the legal use of force, to be more specific. But that doesn't make it moral, right? Like, yeah, like I think the biggest one that I can think of in the past 100 years is the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, which did not happen under the GOP, Mr. Kramer. It happened under a Democrat. That's not to say that the GOP aren't full of their own terrible things, but it's like it would be hard for Kramer to say, well, the government has the right to do it, so that makes it okay. It's like, okay, you're just stating that they have the power. I can state that if I'm locked in the room with a murderer, with a gun, and I have nothing, like, yeah, he has the right to kill me. Not the right to kill me, but he can kill me, but that doesn't make it a good thing for him to do or make it moral or right.
Yeah, his his line of reasoning here reminds me of one of our earliest cringes with when we had TJ on, and he had his interchange with the guy talking about public education, and TJ asked, what makes you say public education's a right? And it's like, of course it's a right. The court said so. It's like the government has a right to force you to obey and has always exercised it. I mean, I don't know that he's necessarily making this argument, but it sounds kind of tautological, where he's like, the government has a right to force you to obey because it's always exercised it, and because it's exercised it, it has that right. And it's like this circular reasoning here, especially under GOP. It's like he's trying to get his point across to what he perceives as the Trumpian anti-vaxxers, and he's saying, like, especially under your team. But the thing that's so tone deaf about that to me is I think a lot of Trump's base would look at the past GOP anyway and say, who cares? Like,
Yep.
like that's not the modern GOP. That's not the modern Republican. That's not Trump's GOP. I don't care. So I don't think that's particularly effective as mentioning that, even if it is true, right? I mean, it happens under every regime, regardless of which letter is in power. They're all basically the same. And I mean, it's he doesn't have any sort of limiting factor as to what, like you said, what makes it ethical or moral or right. Is it literally just the will to power? Is this very Nietzschean idea that, if government decrees it, then it makes it okay because it innately has that right? Because that's a pretty undemocratic thing to think. For all the preaching that people say and about, how much they value democracy, it's like, okay, so you elect this small minority of people to then have the right to force you to obey? That doesn't sound democratic to me. Even if it was democratically chosen, that's still an undemocratic process to get us to obey because they have that right. That's not democracy. So there's no principle here that I think he can stick to, and that's why I think he just resorts to, of course it has the right, just because it exists and it's always exercised it. That's the kind of the totality of the argument.
Yeah, and the alternative to it is freedom, and there's no way we can do that, man. That would be awful.
Freedom's really scary. Freedom means that you actually have to, exercise your own rights and your own responsibilities, and God forbid letting people do that.
Yep. You said everything I was going to say, so. Nice
Okay,
work.
sounds good. We'll move on to our next one. And this one you may have heard if you've been online at all. We got some choice takes under this exchange, but it starts with an interchange between two blue check marks. Our recurring guest on the show, Senator Elizabeth Warren, tweets, "Let's change the rigged tax code so the person of the year will actually pay taxes and stop freeloading off everyone else." And Elon Musk replies, another verified blue check mark, the person of the year times person of this year, in case you're, listening to this in the distant future. "And if you opened your eyes for 2 seconds, you would realize I will pay more taxes than any American in history this year." And then a follow-up reply, "Don't spend it all at once. Oh, wait, you already did." Which is just such a good, I mean, like, he has several replies to her where he just absolutely claps back on her. I mean, it was phenomenal. So the cringe posts, other than Warren's, which is very cringy, come in these three choice replies to this exchange here. "At what tax rate Why shouldn't you pay more taxes than anyone in American history if you've amassed record-breaking, never-seen-before wealth? That's how it's meant to work. Pretty sure I pay a higher tax rate than you do as a single mom. Angry face. What? What? The next tweet reads, "The taxes you didn't pay could have covered my health care." Okay. And then the next reply, "Just because you're paying historically high number, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be paying more. If you're paying a lower percentage than literally anyone else, then that's called BS. You're in the top 5 wealthiest humans. You don't need all that, and people go hungry." I feel like this series of takes is going to give us quite a lot to dissect here. Because, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm going to start at the beginning with Elizabeth Warren's tweet. "Let's change the rigged tax code so Person of the Year actually pays tax and stops freeloading off of everyone else." We've talked, of course, so many times about the benefits, first of all, that, you know, people who are producing things provide in an economy and jobs and all those kinds of things, how they do pay taxes, even if it's not in the traditional way. And even though I'm pretty sure he does pay in the traditional way as well. But my favorite thing about this specific exchange, which we haven't mentioned because it hasn't come up before, is that many of the ways in which Elon Musk has avoided taxes is by getting subsidies through electric vehicle getting subsidies through subsidies. You know, he takes advantage of the electric vehicle subsidies that Senator Elizabeth Warren advocated for. Like, how stupid is that she's getting mad that he's avoiding taxes through programs she set up to help people avoid taxes? I mean, that's so hypocritical, right?
Sorry, I didn't know if you wanted to do another one. I can do the next one.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I just
Cool.
didn't want to.
I
We'll
agree with
going
you.
on a tear. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. So going to the next one, where the single mom is pretty sure she pays a higher tax rate than Elon Musk. So for folks that aren't like tax experts or accounting experts or anything like that, there's two things. There's called marginal tax rates and effective tax rates. So marginal tax rates is the different brackets you fall into. So basically your income, I can't remember quite what it is, but basically from like $0 to $20,000, that's taxed at like 10%, and then from $20,001 to $40,000, it's taxed at another percentage rate. And then there's the effective tax rate, which is the actual average tax rate that you, as a person, are taxed at. So if you make $60,000, you know, the first $20,000 of that is taxed at 10%. The next $20,000 is taxed at another percent, and then the next, you know, however much is taxed at another percentage. And so when it all is said and done, I mean, Elon Musk's top marginal tax rate, because he was in the state of California for, you know, when he's going to get taxed on all this stuff, is about 53%, because you add in, I think it's like 37% federal. You've got another like 3.8% for some of these capital gains. And then you've got another 13% from the California state tax. And so he's paying 53% on a top of a marginal tax rate, which I'm pretty sure is a lot more than what the single mom is paying. And not only that, right, but this Elon Musk is paying, you know, at the top marginal tax rate, he is paying a bigger percent of his income, right? Because I think it's like $15 billion or something like that. So he's paying a huge chunk of his money. It's crazy how much. It's literally billions of dollars of taxes that he's going to pay, and that's not including, you know, all of the taxes that his company pays, all of the income taxes that his you know, employees will pay, all of the different like sales tax and all the different stuff that's going to come through. And so it always is hilarious to me when the little people like this, like, get all like, well, you, and, you know, the next cringe is like, the taxes you didn't pay could have covered my health care. It's like, dude, Elon Musk, just by existing, by building one factory, will literally do more taxes, put more taxes into the system than you will in your entire life, most likely. I think that's wrong. You know, I think it's totally theft. And, you know, there's a lot of like moral issues with these three tweets. But if we're going to look at it from even the perspective, like, let's just grant it to them that, hey, like, the rich should pay more taxes. It's like, it is an inexorbitantly more amount that the rich pay than the poor people pay. And now I guess I'm getting on Jeremy Boring's side. But you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Even if we grant them their moral premise, they're still wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, of course, your and my conclusion out of that is not Jeremy Boring's, which is that, you know, poor people should pay taxes. Ours is that taxes should be reduced and altogether. But all of the tweets really highlight this entitlement, and this idea that because you make money, because you have something, you are obligated and morally responsible to give it to the government, which is just so backwards and gross. Like, him existing and being wealthy, as we've said so many times, that is providing value to people like that. So it's like, the taxes you didn't pay could have covered my healthcare. The taxes he didn't pay are going to go into creating value for other people, lowering costs, and researching new technologies, pushing the human population forward. And then this bottom one, reading it again, just because you're paying a historically high number doesn't mean you shouldn't be paying more. It's like, well, then at what point do you draw your line then again? He's saying you don't need all that and people go hungry. I mean, he called out the UN earlier, right? Was it the UN that made that claim about, all it would cost is X billion dollars to solve world hunger? And he said, okay, great. Make a plan. I'll donate that as long as it's all open source accounting and stuff, right? And they couldn't do it because actually putting those kinds of plans into practice can't really happen from a centrally planned money dump. And so when you have someone like this who's avoiding taxes in certain ways, one, usually, not always, because there are corrupt things, but usually the things that help you avoid taxes are providing some other benefit to society. That's at least the idea behind a tax break or a subsidy or something, right? So in his case, like an electric vehicle subsidy, well, the idea is he's making a more renewable green car so that, the taxes he's avoiding is actually incentivized or because he's helping climate change, hypothetically. Or in other examples like tax credits for children or things like that, because you want a healthy economy full of people to help, raise society up and have more productive people with, unlimited resource of, brain power, ingenuity, innovation, those kinds of things. So like even though not all, tax break or subsidies are perfectly wholesome, there are some corrupt deals that get cut out. The idea behind them, at least in their worldview, is that they are providing some alternative benefit and value to society. So you can't just look at it in this value or this vacuum of him being like, oh, I found this loophole to stop paying taxes and it's providing no other value. Like, one, the money he saves goes back into usually the economy in some way, shape, or form. It goes into innovation, goes into research, goes into making his company more profitable, offering things at a lower rate. And two, the ways in which he's getting the tax breaks usually provide some sort of benefit or some kind of value that whoever set up the tax break wants. Again, not always perfect because it's through a government system, but it often can be at least an alleged good.
Yeah, I think what makes me cringe at these, as well as any other person that kind of says this stuff, like you hear it a lot, right? Like people say Amazon pays no taxes and Tesla pays no taxes and the rich need to pay their fair share and all these different things. I hear this a lot, obviously living in Seattle. And usually my first question, if I'm in person with someone and I feel like I can talk to them, right, through this stuff, I said, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean they pay no taxes? Like, they pay sales tax, they have different tax breaks because they brought some sort of factory, and that was, like, negotiated by the state government, potentially, or even the federal government. Like they also pay, income taxes. They've got all sorts of different taxes levied on them that they do pay. So where are you getting this number that they don't pay any taxes? What do you mean by that? And most of these people can't answer that, right? They don't actually have a way to back up what they're saying. And what that signals to me is that it is all about entitlement, greed, and anger. Like they're unhappy, grumpy people. And, I think Elon Musk actually called Elizabeth Warren Senator Karen. They're just kind of those type of folks, right? They're just looking for something to be angry about. And they want to blame their misfortunes or their lack of status in life on some exterior factor, and this is the easiest way to do it. So they make an argument without even thinking, without any of the proof behind what they are trying to say. And that's what makes it so cringe. And I hope a lot of these folks wake up, right? Because then not only will there be less of this misinformation out there about the tax code and the fair share that's being paid by rich people and that all that stuff, but they'll also be able to start moving on in their lives and making themselves better, because you can't really do that if you're focused on some extenuating factor. If this dude that thinks that Elon Musk could have paid for his health care, if he just maybe tried to improve his position in life, maybe he wouldn't have to really worry about that, instead of just lamenting that Elon Musk employs 100,000 people and 100,000 different families and feeds them.
Another thing that strikes me about the last of these tweets is the middle line when he says, if you're paying a lower percentage than literally anyone else, then that's called BS. And when I think about that line in particular, it actually betrays a lot about the worldview and mentality of a lot of these people, where it's not about solving real needs and real problems. It's about being fair in their quote unquote definition. It's about making sure that everyone's playing by the set of rules the government enacts, not actually solving or helping anything. It's kind of like that one post about I wish that there were no billionaires so that we could solve all these problems. It's the same mentality, because who cares if he's paying a lower percentage if he's paying literally 10 times what everyone else in the world is paying, right? If you have this problem that is, let's say, homelessness, and you can solve homelessness for a cost, let's say, as a lot of these people think, then don't you only really care about meeting that cost? Why does it matter if Elon Musk pays, 0.1% of his wealth or 5% of his wealth or 10% of his, who cares? If he's contributing so much more to help that problem and it's at a fixed amount that you're working toward, then why does it matter if his percentage is high or low? And then ultimately it's because government is this ever-growing thing that is never content to actually work on problems and solve them and fix them and then be done with them. It's this ever-growing hungry monster that just needs to keep consuming power and wealth from people. And then also because people feel like, it's not fair that I have to give, less money, but it's a bigger percentage of what I make. But it's like, okay, but maybe that's because maybe we should just reduce the amount that you have to pay. I think that's probably the better solution here, because if Elon Musk can pay so much more dollars, so much individually, than you are, but it's a lower percentage, then let's work to reduce your percentage, because obviously he's picking up the slack that you aren't. Quite unlike Elizabeth Warren's last line of "stop freeloading off of everyone else." Like what a bizarro world we live in, right?
I just can't, dude. I cannot stand people like her when they say freeload. It's like, you have lived off the government dime for years, decades. You think about that, Elizabeth Warren, you think about Senator Bernie Sanders, who has never in his life, created an actual job or created any sort of wealth or value for anyone. He's been a public servant, quote unquote, for his entire life. Elizabeth Warren has a little bit different. I think she used to be like a professor at Harvard and stuff. So there's a little bit more value there. But regardless, these folks make tons of money off of us, right? At the end of a gun, they point a gun at you and say, "Hey, you pay taxes. That pays our salaries. And if you don't, you go to jail." And it just the audacity of this lady to claim that people that want to avoid funding her salary where she does nothing with are freeloaders is just, I just can't stand it, man. I appreciate Elon Musk treating her with the respect that not that she requests, but the respect that she deserves, which is basically zero.
Absolutely. I agree. That line just triggers me, man. It's pretty bad. Okie dokie. We'll move on to our next cringe post. And this one's like from an article here, so it's kind of midway through the article. So I'll start here. It's kind of in the middle of the context, but you'll pick it up as I read here. So he's handed a gun on a movie set. Clooney said he looks at it and checks it. I show it to the person I'm pointing it to. We show it to the crew. Every single take, you hand it back to the armorer when you're done, and you do it again. Baldwin responded, "Well, there were a lot of people who felt it necessary to contribute some comment to the situation, which really didn't help the situation. At all. If your protocol is you check the gun every time, well, good for you. I've probably handled weapons as much as any other actor in films with an average career. Again, shooting or being shot by someone. And in that time, I had a protocol, and it never let me down." Well, until it did, right? It never let me down. Yeah, but there always has to be a first time for a bad protocol to make a mistake, right?
Yeah, what
Um,
really got me about this one is Baldwin's line of, "If your protocol is you check the gun every time, well, good for you." As if there's any other protocol to gun safety. Like there's no other protocol. Every time you get a gun, you check it, you make sure it's not loaded, and even if you can verify that it's not loaded, you sure as hell don't point it at someone, and then you definitely don't pull the trigger or cock it, because it's a single action revolver. Like you don't pull the hammer back. Like this is the guy that was advocating for gun control. It's like, dude, you know nothing about this whole thing. Like that line, I was showing it to my brother and we just laughed our butts off because it's like everyone has their own protocol. No, like go to a gun range. It's the same protocol every time.
this like reeks of like the little kid who has been bluffing about something his whole time known him, like, oh, I've got the latest video game console, oh, I beat that game 100%, and then you go over to his house and you're like, dude, you don't even own the console. What are you talking about? You don't even own the game. And because it's like, him preaching about, oh, all these gun nut idiots don't know how to do everything. Like, this is why we need gun control. And then you put him in proximity to a gun and he reveals that he knows absolutely nothing. And he's, well, good for you. But that's, my protocols always work. No, it doesn't. It hasn't worked. You do check it every time. And that's, the point that anyone who defends the Second Amendment always makes, and so I will continue to make it, is that the people who own guns are the ones who know how to operate them, the ones who are always the most clear on safety measures, on self-defense measures, on restraint and aiming, on anything when it comes to that. Like cleaning your gun. It's a machine. You have to clean it, right? I bet Alec Baldwin doesn't even know you have to clean a gun except to make it look pretty for the prop guns on set. You know what I mean? Like he's just this idiot who's been so removed from reality that when he makes a mistake, he can't even own up to it. He's, my protocol has always worked for me. Like, okay, but it didn't, dude. Like, that's on you. You didn't check it every time. You failed the test that every single gun rights activist always promotes. You're the idiot, not the other way around.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny about it. It's like, because these Hollywood liberals and elites, that advocate for gun control, it's like, oh, people just can't be trusted. They're not smart enough to handle these weapons of war and stuff. And it's like, dude, like you didn't know I guarantee you go ask 10 out of 10 people that own a gun, responsible gun owners that have not had any negative discharges or anything like that. You ask them, you say, hey, what are the 3 rules, right, of when you grab a new gun? Like, what do you make sure you do? It's like, well, I pick it up, make sure my finger's not on the trigger, I make sure it's not loaded, and I sure as hell don't point at anything I don't intend to destroy. Like that, like every one of them will say that, and it's just it's so smug, and like it's like what I'm happy about is it kind of reveals him to be the idiot that he is on this subject. Maybe he's smart in other ways. I obviously don't know him personally. But at least on guns, it's like, yeah, 1, you don't know what you're talking about, and 2, your ineptitude and your ignorance killed someone at best, right? There's a lot of talk about potentially it was on purpose, but like at best, your negligence killed someone. And the other side of it too, it's just like, dude, like whether you did it intentionally or not, someone is dead from a gun that you held in your hand, and your first instinct is to like justify yourself. In that. It's like, man, like what an awful person, just an awful person.
Well, and like his one interview, he's like in tears saying, I didn't pull the trigger. And it's like, man, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, and I don't have, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but guns don't tend to just go off when being held.
He pulled the hammer back at least. He pulled the hammer back at least.
There was setup that was required for this to some degree, so you got to take ownership of some level of this, man. I don't know. It was pretty cringy, and I think the demonization of gun culture in general, really it almost promotes ignorance when you have to use it, because obviously Baldwin's not a gun owner. Obviously, he's in that perfect middle ground of not owning it so that he doesn't have the training and the methodology and the seriousness with which handling one requires. But he's also not like, he hasn't positioned himself in a level of humility where he's like, I don't own a gun, so I need to take this very seriously and learn He's in that awkward middle ground of he doesn't know enough to know how little he knows and how careful you need to be. But he knows enough that he feels like he's entitled to holding this thing and not follow the check every time protocol, but follow his own protocol. So he's got the arrogance of someone who's like right in the middle of that. It's the meme of like the IQ, the bell curve, of distribution, where it's like low IQ and it says something, and then middle IQ, it says something that contradicts that, and then the high IQ and it says the exact same thing as the low IQ, right? And it's like low IQ, like I'm scared of guns, like I'm going to check it every single time because I don't think anyone should, or because I don't feel equipped to handle this. You have middle IQ, no one knows how to handle these things, but I'm going to follow my own protocol. And then high IQ, I'm a gun owner. I'm an expert with these. I check it every single time, It's he's just in that awkward, smarmy, arrogant middle ground.
Yeah, incompetent. It's there's like different levels of competence. So there's like unconscious incompetence, so you don't know what you're not good at. Then there's conscious incompetence, which is like, I know I'm not good at this thing. Conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. And like he falls into the worst level. He's unconsciously incompetent. Like he doesn't know what he's not good at, and he just does a lot of things he's not good at, especially with this.
Yep. Exactly right. Okay, well, we'll move on. Okie dokie. And this one's really good. This one's from Twitter, and it reads, I just woke up from a nightmare that the elastic on my N95 snapped, and I was inside with other people, and I could feel air from the room suddenly on my face as my mask flapped open. My heart is still pounding. Parentheses, I'm fully vaccinated, and this is how intense I am about masking. Man, This one to me, it gives me the exact same energy as all the people who are like, I'm vaccinated, but I got COVID and it was terrible. Imagine how much worse it would be if I wasn't vaccinated. So make sure to get vaccinated. You're like, wait, how do you draw that? But it's this weird mythos around the masking or the vaccine or whatever it is that's pervaded our culture, that these are the things that will save you, and you are in imminent danger if you are not masked, and you can feel being next to some other human. Oh, the horror.
Yeah, it's this. I both cringe at this, and I also feel sad for this person. And they've got a PhD in their Twitter handle, but like, this is all the signs of someone with an anxiety disorder, right? Like, it's like this person needs to go see a counselor about these different things. It's like, dude, like, you're having nightmares about your N95 and you breathing air, and you wake up with your heart pounding, and then you got to tag at the end of your tweet like a virtue signal, like, I'm this responsible about masking. Like, gosh darn it, dude. Like chill out, go drink a scotch and just, chill on the couch for a little bit and ponder life. And I don't know if you've listened to it yet, but Joe Rogan had Dr. Peter McCullough on his podcast, and it's fantastic. He's a very decorated, well-published physician and epidemiologist and cardiovascular doctor. And basically, he lays out all the different studies, all the different statistics for, I think it's about a 3-hour podcast on the science of masking and different treatments for COVID, and the why vaccines are not, now they're having a drop off and not working. I guess we're gonna have to bummer. YouTube's gonna take us off because I just said that, but it'll be okay. It'll be all right. We're gonna be on Odyssey and it'll be fine. But it's a fantastic episode. People, if you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to it because it's full of information that's really, really good. But it's just the other one that we reference all the time, right? Is the charts they forgot, or what was it? What's the URL again? For Tom Woods?
Yeah, charts they forgot, or I can't remember exactly, but I think if you search charts they forgot.
Yeah, so Tom Woods has a nice, he has this chartstheyforgot.com, I think is what it is, and basically he lines out neighboring states, counties, and cities, and ones that literally had like no mask mandate versus ones that did have a mask mandate. And like he's like, could you choose, here's the lines, the moving averages for COVID, infections, and now tell me which line has the mask mandate and which one doesn't have the mask mandate, and he'll show like 4 lines. And they all look identical, right? They're all exactly the same. And that's not to say that, like, if you have an N95, at least this person is wearing an N95, right? Like, that's actually rated to catch the particles that it can infect you with COVID-19. But the cloth mask that, like, everyone wears is not, it doesn't actually stop the virus from getting out and potentially infecting you. And so it's just hilarious to me to see the actual data lined out that way. And when people are confronted with that, it actually makes them kind of scratch their heads and take a second thought.
And maybe this is a little, I don't know, unfair of me, but I also roll my eyes at this when they're like, my heart is still pounding, as if, it's kind of that meme about, like in a couple sleeping and one of them wakes up and, in my dream, you cheated on me, and they're mad at them for in real life for something that happened in their own dream, but that's like the kind of the vibes I get from this, where, they're like sharing this terrifying experience online as like this cautionary tale about a stupid dream that didn't even happen, and you're just so in that mindset that you're like, this is not only is this like impacting me, but it's worth sharing online. Yikes.
Well, it's just a virtue signal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I share stupid things online, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, I try not to at least sound sanctimonious when I share stupid things.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy, man. Like my band was over in Montana in November. We were playing some shows and stuff, and it's totally open over there, right? And it's pretty weird, like, because here in Seattle, like, basically if you want to go into a store and not get harassed or asked to leave or anything like that, you've got to wear a mask, right? So it's like, as much as I can, I don't wear it, but if someone asks me to, I'm going to put it on. And then once they ask me to put it on, I leave it on, because I don't want to be. I want to have as much peace with people as I possibly can. But it was nuts to be over there and to realize like how much, even me with my anti-establishment, views and all this, like when I would enter into a restaurant, I'd reflexively reach into my pocket to try and grab or find a mask, right? Even though you don't need one over there. You don't need to wear one. It's like, man, like if this whole, however long it's been, almost 2 years now worth of cramming down these mandates and creating a new normal and all this has gotten to me, folks like this person, that are having nightmares about it and wake up with their heart pounding, it's going to be really, really, really probably even impossible for them to get back to normal in their own brains. It's going to take a tremendous amount of courage, for them to do that, and an awakening for them to do that. And I hope we can get back there, but it seems there might be a section of us that never do.
Yeah, it's really scary, because the more this becomes normalized, the more it will become normal for other kinds of diseases and stuff as well. Like during flu season, stores just requiring you to wear a mask, because during, from, October to February, we ask that you wear a mask due to, and I can see that being a reality. The fact that this has lingered for 2 years is really the terrifying part about it, right? Because I think that there are always going to be people on the fringes like this, who will always take the extreme, I don't know, overreaction. But if this keeps going for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, how much more is that overreaction, at least in their mind, justified or vindicated or set in stone? Because I think it would have been one thing if this kind of reaction happened after 6 months, like during 6 months of COVID, and then people just lifted restrictions and that was the end of it, right? That kind of thing would kind of look down upon. They'd be a little bit mocked, a little bit, that ideology would be scoffed at. The fact that it's unscientifically being prolonged to 2 years means that this kind of person feels justified, because even though the data doesn't actually back them up, the officials do. And as long as the officials say it, then that's all that's all that really matters in a lot of people's minds, because, well, they're the government. Why would they be wrong? I think that a lot of people default to that, like this idea that the government and the experts or whatever, because there's so much information in the world we live in, that they can't verify everything themselves. And so they're like, there's just no way that someone who's my governor, for instance, would have anything but the right data or the right motives or whatever. But obviously that's not the case. But it's just, I think, where a lot of people default.
Yeah, there was a kind of on your thing about like experts. There was this article I read on Tablet Mag by a guy named Konstantin Kisin. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but basically he lays out from February of 2020 to now all of the ways that the government has contradicted itself, and all the different ways the media has lied, or in obvious ways, factual, like they lied, or they got this wrong. And he's like, this is the reason why people are either vaccine hesitant or vaccine resistant, because you've gotten it wrong almost every step of the way, and then you've never admitted to being wrong. And then there's also a lot of different, facts that shed light on potential, ill motive on the government's part, particularly like Fauci and these different doctors and Pfizer and Moderna, and then, all the politicians and stuff. And it's a fantastic read. I think I can link to it in our show notes page, so I'll do that. But it's just, I think one of the silver linings of these past 2 years has been a lot of people waking up to like, oh yeah, the media and the politicians are not our friends, and they lie, and they are dishonest, and they will lie for their own gain, and they will do it unashamedly so. And that's pretty cool for people to wake up to that. I know a lot of my friends have woken up to that, which is neat. And even if I don't necessarily align with them on certain policies or a certain amount of intervention or whatever, I think just getting on the same page that people in power are usually corrupt is a pretty good page to be on.
Yeah, I think even in I don't know, 2016 campaign, the rallying cry that Donald Trump had about fake news, well, the journalists being terrible and against him, and even that to me seemed like almost a little like extreme or cringy, because I always kind of viewed it more in this right wing, like I only listen to Fox News, so everything CNN, MSNBC says is wrong. I was also fresh out of college, where that's kind of even well-meaning people who aren't trying to radicalize me, they value the institutions that exist, the corporate media, like, oh, I don't know, like The Economist is always going to be a good balanced source for news. And I don't hate The Economist comparatively. Like, I think they're fine, but so that was sort of my positioning. And so it's like Trump comes out so strongly against the media, and I'm like, oh, he's just throwing red meat to the base, kind of using it as a political tactic. And then the more and more since then, you realize just how bad the media actually is in your own lifetime. And then you kind of start thinking back over history, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, actually, there were some historical examples that I kind of thought were more one-offs, but then you link it to everything that you're experiencing now, and it makes so much more sense. And I think that that's a key factor for a lot of people, is that history and like trends, political trends of the past, they either don't interest them. It's like, oh, anything older than like the presidents of my lifetime is irrelevant, doesn't matter. Or they're interested, but it doesn't feel like the same world that we live in. There's no direct link and draw. It's like, oh, well, yeah, sure. Like, the Watergate scandal happened, but like, that was before I was alive. So now we're in the enlightened era where this kind of thing wouldn't happen. But it's like, once you have these examples of the media or the government doing these corrupt things, and you can kind of link it to those historic examples, either that you weren't previously interested in, or that you were, but you didn't really tie together, I think that illuminates it for a lot of people. Because even a skeptic like myself, I feel a lot more keen on this sort of how terrible, manipulative the media is in bed with the government, in instilling this kind of hysteria that creates people like this who dream about their N95 snapping, than I was before.
No, it's good. I don't have any more on this one. That was well said.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. Always have a good time on the show. And if you're having a good time, please remember to leave us a review, comment, like, subscribe. Really helps us out a lot. And we will see you on the next one. We're going to, I think the next one's going to be our Cringemas special. So be excited for that. We're going to give you the ghost of Cringemas past, I think, is the plan. So
I like it.
Yeah. I don't expect the other two ghosts, but I think just the past for now. So anyway,
there you go.
But we'll see you on that episode. Thanks so much, and take care.